Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the Compassionate, the Merciful. My name is Ibrahim Hooper. I'm National Communications Director with the Council on American Islamic Relations, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. Obviously, we're here today on a very tragic day to offer some kind of response to just a senseless, horrific act of terrorism that took at least 49 lives of innocent worshipers in New Zealand. And we have a number of people and groups who will respond to that. We'll quickly go through the people who are responding, offer some quick comments, and then after the end of the news conference, we'll take some questions. First of all, we'll have CAIR's National Executive Director, Nihad Awad. That's Nihad Awad, CAIR National Executive Director.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Good morning. This is a very sad day for all of us. I just woke up on a call informing me that 49 people have been gunned down in two mosques in New Zealand by someone who believes in white supremacy and believes in the fact that what he has been told, what he has heard, that immigrants are invaders. Let me say this. We mourn the loss of these 49 innocent people who were standing in sincere worship of God in two mosques. And we offer sincere condolences to their families and their loved ones. And we condemn this horrific attack as a terrorist attack, motivated and carried out by white supremacists. And we urge mosques nationwide, because today is a Friday, and Friday is the weekly prayer for Muslims nationwide. In the United States, we have over 3,000 mosques. So millions of people who are Muslim will be in mosques in the next couple of hours, concerned and fearful about their lives. If someone might come and hurt them, they have very legitimate fears. And they are being told to be afraid by white supremacists and political leaders who believe in white supremacy. And we tell our community, do not be afraid and do not abandon your mosques. Not today, not ever. They want you to be afraid. You should not be afraid. You should be protected. You have religious freedom protected by the United States Constitution. And we have full confidence in local and federal authorities to provide the necessary security and assurance for our communities to go in mosques, to mosques, and not to be afraid, not to be concerned about their safety and the safety of their families or children while they are praying. And we ask our political leaders to address the growing menace of Islamophobia and hate that has been perpetrated by political leaders, by ideologues, by people who want to run for public office, by people who won public office on the backs of immigrants, blacks, Jews, Muslims, and all minorities. We hold them accountable because their words matter, their policies matter. The perpetrator of this terrorist attack has been inspired by hate mongers in the United States and in Europe. The perpetrator of this horrific and terrorist attack today referenced President Trump in his manifesto. In this manifesto, years ago, when another terrorist attacked people in Norway, he quoted Islamophobes like Spencer and Pamela Geller. Today, the terrorist has quoted the most powerful person in the world, President Trump. And I would like to address Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump, your words matter. Your policies matter. They impact the lives of innocent people at home and globally. And you should condemn this, not only as a hate crime, but as a white supremacist terrorist attack. And you need to assure all of us, Muslims, blacks, Jews, immigrants, that we are protected and you will not tolerate any physical violence against us because we are immigrants or we are minority. You need to condemn this clearly today. And you do not need to be you do not need to be vague. You have to be very clear on this. And we are looking forward to hearing from you because your policies matter. During your presidency and during your election campaign, Islamophobia took a sharp rise, and attacks on innocent Muslims, innocent immigrants, and mosques have skyrocketed. We hold you responsible for this growing anti-Muslim sentiment in the country and in Europe. But also, we do not excuse those terrorist attackers against minorities at home and abroad. Our message is and should be one. We are united in solidarity. We will not tolerate division. We have to stand next to each other. In the same way, we stood with our Jewish brothers and sisters after they were attacked while worshiping in the Tree of Life synagogue. In the same way also, we stood by our African American brothers and sisters when they were worshiping in the South Carolina Emmanuel African Church. This is the message that we are united, and we are also united against the Trojan ideology that sees immigrants as invaders. We should not tolerate this hate speech because hate speech leads to violence. And politicians can set a tone of tolerance and unity, and they can also set the tone of division and violence. And now we are looking at the results of hate speech and propaganda against the Muslim minority. Thank you.
And if you read the manifesto, it's clear that this individual who wrote it wants to sow division. The very purpose of this act of violence was to sow division and to create hatred and to promote the people separating and fighting each other. And obviously, as Brother Nihad said, the answer to that is to come together in unity and solidarity. Otherwise, this terrorist or the terrorist group behind him ends up winning. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Abbas Bazagar, CAIR's research director, will give a brief synopsis of how the data we've been seeing shows what's going on in this context, in this country and around the world.
Okay, good morning. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Abbas Barzgar, A-B-B-A-S, Barzegar, B-A-R-Z-E-G-A-R. As you know, CAIR has been monitoring and reporting on hate crimes, bias incidents, and discrimination incidents for quite some time. Our office is directly responsible for that, and what we can confirm is that there is a consistent rise, as there has been a rise in anti-Semitism, attacks of anti-Semitism and others. There's been a consistent rise in anti-Muslim bias incidents and hate crimes and attacks against Muslims at mosques. And although this seems to go unreported or unnoticed in media, our offices around the country get reports on a regular basis of harassments as innocuous or as sort of day-to-day banal things like people getting harassed in grocery stores, in streets, or getting chased down on highways, to as terrible as murders in Indiana just a couple of weeks ago that no national press actually covered. And so it's absolutely necessary that we don't wait until we have horrific situations like this, horrific incidents of kind of global importance, to pay attention to this issue. I'll be quite honest, right now it seems to be the case that we only look at fires, but we smell the burning smoke from miles and miles away and we ignore it. We say, oh, there's some burning smoke, there might be something, and we only pay attention when the fire is brought directly into our face. I'll say that the fire is there, it's brewing, it's international, and it has a source, it has a cause, it has a structure to it. And so the one thing that we have to pay attention to, I'll depart from conversations about statistics for just a second, is we have to pay attention to the ideology that breeds this kind of activity. Hate has the same DNA everywhere that you see it. Okay? Hate has the same DNA everywhere that you see it. It has the same goals in mind, the same pathological ideologies that exist in this manifesto, which God forbid you would actually take the time to read, exist in the manifestos of other mass murderers around the world. They are directly related to ideas that are carried out in certain quarters in our own society, that exist in radio shows, that exist in TV shows, that have dog whistles by mainstream politicians, by mainstream news commentators. And so we have to recognize that that is the smoke, that is the burning smoke that's out there that tells us where the fire is. And we as a community have to take control and leadership back in our public space. It is not the case that this is some random marginal activity on the internet in some kind of close dark web or something. No, this stuff is mainstream now. Hate has the same DNA. You can recognize it where it is, and you have to put a stop to it. We have to ask our TV networks to be responsible. We have to ask our social media platforms to be responsible. We have to ask our charities and philanthropic communities to be responsible and not allow these people to guide, to exploit freedom of speech, exploit nonprofit covers. These are hate groups, special interest groups with a very nefarious agenda, and we have to be able to take that activity back. So with that, I'll leave. If anybody has any questions about the specifics about the manifesto, I can get into it later. I'd rather not go into those kind of details here. Thank you.
All right. Now we have some community leaders who are here to show their solidarity with the Muslim community in this country and in New Zealand. First of all, we have David Inoue, Executive Director of the Japanese American Citizens League.
Good morning. David Inoue with the Japanese American Citizens League. It's spelled I-N-O-U-E. I'm the Executive Director of JACL. We are the oldest and largest Asian American civil rights organization in this country. It is with a very heavy heart that I come here today to stand with our friends in the Muslim community. What happened in New Zealand is unfortunately becoming all too common of an occurrence. It's unthinkable that nearly 100 people have either been killed or injured in coordinated attacks on 2 different mosques, sacred places of worship. We can make no mistake, the evil behind these attacks is too often rooted in white supremacy and exposed by the targeting of places of worship, whether most recently a Muslim mosque in New Zealand, a Jewish synagogue in Pittsburgh, an African American church in Charleston, or a Sikh Gurdwara in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. For these killers, nothing is held sacred, and these targets are selected because of the religion that they practice. It's not new. Hatred and discrimination have a long history. The Japanese American experience is one where we were incarcerated because of who we are. But that didn't happen just with the incarceration. To build upon what was said earlier, that began with the subtle racism, the discrimination against Japanese Americans, against Asian Americans, against Chinese Americans, and that's what led to incarceration. We don't have incarceration now. Instead, what we have is attempts at genocide. We have people being killed because of who they are, and that is wrong. With all the talk of immigrants invading our country, threatening our way of life, the need to build a wall, it's actually the opposite. We now have a segment of our country that is eroding the ideals of what it means to be American from the inside. We are increasingly not a nation that stands for religious freedom and diversity as memorialized in our First Amendment, and it now appears we are exporting that hatred and evil to other countries. Today is Friday, the day of community worship in the Muslim community, and in fact that time of prayer will be coming quickly at the noon hour. We hope that Muslims around the world today can find strength in their community as they worship together and know that they are surrounded by a wider community of other faiths and beliefs that stands with them. Together, we will all continue to work together to eradicate Islamophobia and other forms of hatred that weaken us as a nation and as a world community. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Yusra Ghazi with the DC Interfaith Council.
Good morning. It's USRA GHAZI with the DC Interfaith Commission and also America Indivisible. Peace and blessings to you all. We pray for the victims of the horrific attacks on the Christchurch Muslim community, for their families, and for all those affected by this most vile expression of hate, Islamophobia, and bigotry in New Zealand earlier today. This attack follows a line of similar white supremacist attacks on places of worship, churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples. Attacks like this are an attack on all of us, and it demands a united response. Many are asking, what can I do to show solidarity for my Muslim friends, co-workers, neighbors, and community members? I invite you all to reach out in proactive ways, make calls, show up at Friday prayer services in your area, and show solidarity both through your words and actions. Last night, my mayor's office texted me to ask what more can be done to fight bigotry, anti-Muslim bigotry, and hate in our communities. I invite all elected officials, and particularly those in local government, to reflect deeply on this question. We ask local government officials to oppose hate speech and hate violence in every form, and to be better at tracking and reporting on hate crimes. We ask you to ensure that religious centers receive appropriate security protection, particularly during mass gatherings. We call on mayors and governors, city council members, and county commissioners to go beyond expressions of thoughts and prayers, and to respond to this tragedy by bringing people together in the communities you serve to affirm our human solidarity. All of us, as Americans, can do more to recognize the common humanity of our neighbors and to build a community of inclusion that protects the rights of all to live and worship in peace and safety. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from N.G. Mohsen, Policy Programs Manager with the Muslim Public Affairs Council.
Good morning. My name is N.G. Mohsen, E-N-G-I-E-M-O-H-S-E-N. We at the Muslim Public Affairs Council stand in support and offer our condolences to the Christchurch and New Zealand Muslim community at this time of mourning. We encourage people worldwide to provide, offer donations and other forms of support for the families of the victims once information is made available. This type of violence and the hate that motivates it is unacceptable in any form in any country. We have a responsibility to stand up and reject it. No one should be made to fear practicing their faith or going and attending their place of worship. This tragedy occurred on a Friday afternoon when the mosque would have been filled with people who gathered for Friday prayers, just as those in Pittsburgh when they were attacked and at their synagogue, and the Charleston killer who attacked an African-American church. These types of attacks are often driven by racial, ethnic, and religious hatred, and every elected official has the responsibility to denounce these attacks in the strongest possible terms. In the wake of this terrible attack, we call on elected officials to commit themselves to opposing hate speech and violence in every form, but equally call on citizens to demonstrate acts of solidarity with their Muslim neighbors and coworkers and others. As an ummah and as part of a global community, we stand in support of those impacted by these horrific attacks. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Medea Benjamin, co-director of Code Pink.
So I speak today as both a woman, a member of the Jewish community, and a member of a community that tries to stop war and violence around the world. And I have one word to say today, which is enough. Enough. I've been in these offices before where we've done these press conferences. It's not just calling on our public officials to stop condemn what's happening. It's calling on them to change policies as well. When I see the policies that don't allow people from Muslim communities to come to the United States, that it gives rise to greater Islamophobia. When I see the policies that keep people from entering our country when they're fleeing violence at our border, that is part of the policies that give rise to hatred. When I see policies that are condemning, when I see people who are condemning the two new beautiful Muslim congresswomen that we have representing us, that is also very painful and gives rise to acts of hatred and violence. And so as we look around and we mourn and we think of the families that are trying to bring themselves together to figure out how are they going to rebuild themselves in the wake of this hatred, we not only call on our officials to condemn these acts, but to change the policies that generate this kind of hatred. And as my fellow speakers here have called out, we call on the community as well, because this is a time for us to stand up, for us to reach out to people in the Muslim community and say, you will not fear worshiping in this country because we will be there to protect you. Nobody must fear worshiping in this country. And so I just say finally, let's make this the last time we have to have a press conference here to condemn such an atrocious act. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Stephen Miles, Director of Win Without War.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Miles, and I am the Director of Win Without War, a nationwide network of activists and organizations working for a more peaceful and progressive foreign policy for the United States. There's no words to describe how devastated we are today by the attacks in Christchurch, New Zealand. And on behalf of Win Without War, I'm here to stand in solidarity with Muslim communities across the world, especially those families and loved ones and communities in Christchurch at this time of mourning. Today, in the face of heartbreak and hatred, we choose courageous love and unity. We recommit ourselves to dismantling Islamophobia, anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant hatred, and all forms of dehumanization, racism, and white supremacy that fuel violence like what we saw today at the Al Noor Mosque and the Linwood Islamic Center in Christchurch. No one, as has been said many times already today, no one should fear for their life in a house of worship. No one should go to prayer to seek to commune with their brothers and sisters and be afraid that they will face violence, that they will face intolerance, that they will face hatred and death. We know that this problem is not new. It's been said before. We have seen the smoke of this hatred rising. And when we see the fire, we must ask ourselves not just what happened, but why did we not do more to stop this? Why have we not taken action before this moment to prevent this kind of horror, this kind of violence? We call on everyone, especially our elected officials and political leaders, to take a stand, not just with their thoughts and words, not just with their condolences, but with their actions against the rising anti-Muslim and Islamophobia that we see here in this country, actions to confront this hatred that is spreading all over this country and now, sadly, all over this world. We have had enough of thoughts and prayers. It is time for action. Thank you.
And finally, we'll hear from Catherine Osborne, Executive Director of Shoulder to Shoulder.
Thank you. That's Catherine, C-A-T-H-E-R-I-N-E, Osborne, O-R-S-B-O-R-N. I serve as the Executive Director of Shoulder to Shoulder, which is a coalition-based campaign of 34 national religious groups, U.S.-based religious groups, committed to standing and working together to address anti-Muslim discrimination and violence. This group includes the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops, the Union for Reform Judaism, the Methodists, the Episcopals, the Presbyterians, and a number of other groups, many Christians and Jews from across the nation who are committed to working together to stand in solidarity against this scourge of hate. We mourn together with the community directly impacted by this today and all who are feeling the ripple effects of such an act of hate and violence. Today, we're tragically reminded that hate is anything but benign. And we should be clear that the hate expressed through the horrific violence in New Zealand is not generic. It's about anti-Muslim hate, which among other manifestations of white supremacy has become all too common in our times. We call on political and religious leaders from across the globe to use their platforms to speak out against hate and to take action against hate. And we call on people of faith and conscience everywhere, community members all across, to recommit themselves to the everyday work to fight hate and to show up today with their Muslim neighbors to express their words and their actions of solidarity with their Muslim neighbors in the communities where they live, to let Muslims in the United States and around the globe know that their neighbors stand with them. The silver lining, I think, in situations like this is how many calls I know our organization receives, and I imagine many others in this room also receive, of support and solidarity. We see so many people who want to fight against this type of hate, and we have to keep that going, and we need support from political leaders in particular in addressing this. So together we can advance a world where no one fears for their safety because of how they pray, where they come from, or what they look like, and that's the world we want to bring forward. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If anyone has any questions, go ahead.
For Mr. Awad, you said that President Trump's words matter and that his policies matter. Can you be more specific on what exactly you're referring to?
It is no secret that Mr. Trump has campaigned on white supremacist ideology, on division and fear. He campaigned against immigrants, against Mexicans, against African Americans, against women, against Muslims. Muslims have received the lion's share of his attacks. He promised to shut down immigration from Muslim countries to the United States, and he made that into policies through his executive orders. He said that Islam hates us, and he accused Muslims of celebrating the downfall of the Twin Towers in New Jersey, which was false, and he was never able to substantiate that. His repeated words and statements, and now have turned into policies, have been impacting the mood, the mindset, and also the lives of Muslims here. And now we see that he was able to normalize Islamophobia and to give legitimacy to those who fear Muslims and fear immigrants. So it comes back to him, and we tell him that your words matter and your policies matter. And if he would like to be the leader of the free world, he has to change his policies. And he has to reset the tone by recommitting himself to unity, equality, not only in words, but also in policies. So he has a lot to do, and we hope that he will take the first step by condemning this as a white supremacist attack and terrorist. The killer of this tragedy in New Zealand has cited or referenced Trump. And Mr. Trump should reflect on this. Very few people around the world admire him. And now the ones who are admiring him are the ones who see fear of the other. And he has a role to play in fixing this problem. He's not the only one who's responsible for this, but being the President of the United States, he has a lot of responsibility to reflect on.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you think President Trump's message of condolences this morning is sufficient?
It's a first step, but I think his words are hollow. He has to condemn this as a white supremacist terrorist attack. And he has to commit that policies will follow, change of policies. Otherwise, we will continue to see the rise of anti-immigrant sentiment and attacks, anti-Muslim sentiment and attacks, and we will see, unfortunately, more violence against places of worship at home and abroad.
Hi, for Mr. Awad as well. The author of the manifesto, to the question of whether he supports Donald Trump, he said, as a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose, sure. But he also said, as a policymaker and leader, dear God, no. So it seems like he himself at least didn't see himself as being led by Donald Trump. You said Donald Trump
Well,
was
I think it.
responsible for the attack.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible this man could have come to these conclusions without a President Donald Trump?
Well, you always have hatred and bigotry out there. What Donald Trump has done, he has given legitimacy, a fake legitimacy to hatred and bigotry, and it has empowered bigotry. And we see that time and time again around the country with the incidents we see on a daily basis. But
I mean, many white supremacist attacks on the American Muslim community, the attackers cite Trump and cite his policy. So I don't think any one of us should be surprised that what he says and what he does impacts the attitudes and actions of people, not only at home, but now abroad. And now this anti-immigrant sentiment is globalized. And the leader of the free world has a lot of responsibilities. He should not minimize the importance of his words and his actions and his policies.
And of course, no one's saying that every follower of Donald Trump is a bigot, but there's going to be that tiny minority who take his bigoted words and bigoted policies and turn them into violent actions. Any other questions? Yeah.
Last week, the House passed a resolution condemning religious intolerance. Is there anything else you would like to see from congressional leadership to condemn rhetoric that is perceived to be anti-Muslim?
Yeah, frankly, condemning rhetoric is rhetoric. It has to be backed up by action, and one of the easiest ways for Congress to get behind this is to increase the capacity for state, local municipalities to report on hate crimes and to mandate that kind of reporting. The own FBI's hate crime statistics are an absolute mess. They admit it. There's no method for us to even understand what's happening out there. Okay, so the U.S. Congress can get behind by passing measures to force states and local municipalities to report better and consistently on hate crimes and bias incidents. Do you understand that there are states that don't even have hate crimes legislation on the books, and those that do are watered down to the point that it's almost impossible to hold people accountable for this sort of thing? So Congress should take a much more serious leadership position in encouraging states, local municipalities to do the right thing, to report on this, to make better sense of it, and demonstrate leadership. Condemning rhetoric is rhetoric.
An example of the state without hate crime laws, Indiana. And we just had a murder in Indiana by a man who three witnesses say, was shouting anti-Muslim slurs when he allegedly committed the act of murder. So, any other questions?
Just one quick question. You know, a lot of people are going to hear what you say, and they're going to say, yes, but this took place in New Zealand. Your counter to that mentality that they will hear what you say and say, or be dismissive.
I tell them, read this guy's manifesto. It reads like it was written in America, and it's clearly inspired by the kind of hate rhetoric and growing bigotry that we're seeing in America, referencing Donald Trump, referencing the, quote, invasion of immigrants. All of these themes that we hear on a daily basis are referenced in this manifesto.
This is the picture of a mosque that was firebombed by someone who's motivated by hate. And this is one of many. We have been witnessing an unprecedented number of attacks on mosques. We have not seen violence against mosques, but we fear that it might be coming unless and until our leaders take action to prevent it. So it could be in the pipeline. And now hate groups and mongers are networking among themselves ideologically, and I'm not afraid. I'm not surprised that they might even operationally be working together. So we are here to warn against what might be coming. But the impact of the policies that we have seen have caused a lot of suffering, psychologically and also physically. By preventing Muslims from coming to the United States because of their faith is a messed up policy that has been based on white supremacy and the rejection of people because of their faith or skin color or national origin.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing about this. It will be too easy to identify this action as a foreign event, an isolated act of a mad person, and it's also too easy to blame a certain leader, Trump or any other kind of person out there. What I'm telling you is that this is Trojan horse ideology. Trojan horse ideology views immigrants as invaders. We know what racism looks like. We know what anti-Semitism looks like. When you hear the word invading immigrants, which we've heard in this administration, and we've seen people send, stunt shows and circus shows of sending the military down to the border to do what? Nothing, except send the message that immigrants are the enemy, all right? This Trojan horse mentality is what fuels it. So it's not about one leader who can get elected and put, in and out of office. It's not about one lone ranger out there doing something crazy. This is about an ideology that we should all recognize by now. Hate has the same DNA, whether it's ISIS, whether it's Nazi Germany, whether it's right now with a global network of white supremacist ethno-nationalists of European background trying to push back some kind of globalizing tide of integration and harmony. These are fascists. We have to recognize it.
All right, well, thank you. Okay, just.
Our Arab American communities and Muslims in the U.S. can do now? What can they do now?
Well, I think what we talked about previously is the person or persons who carried out this act sought to create divisions. So the answer to that is to create unity, to create solidarity. Reach out to your neighbors of other faiths, as other speakers said. Reach out across ethnic and racial and religious boundaries and build those bonds of solidarity and mutual understanding. And that's how you challenge these people. All right, thank you all for coming. Everybody's available for one-on-one interviews if you would like. Thank you. I don't know if...
representative from the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, in addition to the other speakers.
Did you want to say a few words?
Would you like to say a couple words?
Just state your name and title.
Iman Bukadum, IMAN, last name B as in boy, OUKA, D as in dog, OUM as in Mary, and sure, I'm the senior staff attorney at the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. First of all, ADC and the American Arab community, in unequivocal terms, absolutely condemns this white supremacist crime. It's a crime against Muslims, immigrants, and all people who believe in equality, who believe in human rights, and who believe in social justice. We're absolutely disappointed with our president, and we understand that our president's rhetoric and his model and example are part of the problem, and that he, in fact, is helping white supremacists around the world perpetrate heinous crimes. And so we call on our president to hopefully categorically condemn what is obviously a terrible, heinous crime against Muslims, against immigrants, and against people who have the right to worship. And so we just want to say that this is a time of mourning. Our heartfelt condolences go out to the community in New Zealand. We are here for you. And we just ask that all Muslims around the world and all those who attend Friday prayers and messages generally be vigilant And please stay focused on your safety, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or issues. Thank you so much to CAIR, and peace and blessings.
All right. Again, thank you for coming, and everybody's available for one-on-one interviews. Thank you.